Crafting in PoE can be confusing. We have hundreds of affixes, tons of currencies, different item levels, 20 or so omens, alloys, essences, slamming, bricking, fishing, desecrations, tags, and numerous other concepts that make one want to go back to D4. But no worries, my elderly man, I'm here to guide you through it. Because it's time for you to stop just putting random currencies on your gear and calling it a day and experience some proper crafting. It's actually fun as fuck. I'll take you through all of the crafting basics, the most important currencies and omens, several important crafting strategies, and how to actually start making currency crafting in this game. So let's get started with the absolute basics. This will be a long one, so if already familiar with the topic, just skip ahead using the timestamps. To start crafting, there are only 3 things you need to understand. You need to understand what an item actually is, which may sound dumb, but bear with me. You need to understand what currencies we have, and you need to know where you find information. Let's start out with the actual item. Pressing Alt here, you'll find a lot of important information before you craft. First, we have the different rarities. We have normal, magic, rare, and uniques. Duh, right? Well, all these require different strategies when crafting. The unique is my favorite. There you just throw a Vol orb on it and say fuck this game when you forgot to add a socket. For the other rarities, for now, just remember that once you've made an item rare, then you can't turn it back into magic. And if you've made it magic, then you can never turn it back into normal. Then we have the prefixes and suffixes. You can have 3 of each, unless you have some kind of modifier or rune that adds an extra one. And modifiers are locked to roll as either a prefix or a suffix. You'll never get a resistance modifier as a prefix, for example. We can also see the item level here, which is an important one because it dictates what modifiers can roll on the item. Since these sneakers are only item level 65, they can't roll the highest resistance modifiers, for example. I'll show you where you can see this soon. We can also see the tiers here, the lower the better, where tier 1 is the best. As mentioned earlier, these boots are too low of an item level to roll the highest resistances, which is the same as saying they can't roll tier 1 resistances. And lastly, which is probably the most important one before starting a craft, the item base. You can see these sneakers have an armor base and go by the name of Elegant Greaves. This too dictates what modifiers can roll on this item. Okay, so now we know what we are working with. Next, let's check out what currencies we have. If you go to your Stash tab or the Currency Exchange, you'll see the basic currencies. Orb of Transmutation adds a modifier to a normal white item. Augmentation adds it to a magic item. All of these are also the same, just that they force a modifier with a higher level. The Transmutation and Augmentation orbs are your best friends when finding white items. You can just throw them on and pray that you hit something good. After price checking, that is, because some normal items go for substantial amounts of currency. There are, however, some tricks we can use on normal bases that isn't just random slamming, but they are reserved for higher tier crafting, so more on that later. Instead, let's make this item rare. To do that, we can do one of 2 things. We can use a regal orb and pray, or we can use an essence. On a magic item, you would be using a greater essence to add an extra modifier. It's good to familiarize with these, but there's also a website we'll use for this later. Now though, I'm going to use a regal here. Once the item is rare, we have a few more basic currencies we can use. I'm just going to call these the rare basic currencies. We have Exalted Orbs, adding a modifier. We have Chaos Orbs, changing a modifier to something else. And we have some Perfect Essences that remove a modifier and add a new one as well, but with the difference that we actually know what we'll add. A great new addition this league is that we also have the equivalent of Perfect Essences for jewels. Now, pretty much all the complex and expensive omens in the game are actually just there to influence the rare basic currencies. Let's say we have a shitty prefix on our rare item. Then we could just type in prefix and see what we can do with it. We could add a prefix, that won't work. We can chaos orbit away, that could work. Or annul it, that could also work. Or we can use an essence and remove it using this omen. Sure is a lot easier just typing in prefix than staring at this confusing table. Alright, for now let's just throw on an exalted orb. Now we have one modifier left to fill. For pretty much all of your crafts, you're going to fill at least one modifier with a desecration. This is because you'll have additional rerolls and more choices. But you can also decide what modifiers you want beforehand, using these strange-looking abyssal omens. For now, though, let's just grab one of the cheaper desecrations for a belt. Congratulations, you've crafted your first item. Good job. Unfortunately, it's complete dog shit. For the next item, let's actually make a plan on how to craft it by learning how to find information using PoE.db. This is what I'm using for all of my crafts. This website is going to be your best friend. Its logo also reminds me of another website that I'm fond of, but there's also another website that is great for crafting, Path of Exile 2. This one's great if you want to do simulations or practice crafting without using your own currency. But for now, let's check out PoE.db. When we started our craft, we had just a normal random white base. But there are lots of them, and there's a reason your loot filter lights up when some of them drop. They are simply just better. To find these, go to Items. Let's check out the body armors. First have the uniques, then we have the whopping 300 white bases. Fortunately, these ones are all low level, so we can scroll down a bit. The ones further down are also just Runeforged versions of the above ones. Now let's say you're playing an energy shield build. What item should you craft on? Well, there are some bases that come with implicits, such as spirit, movement speed, and other good stuff, but usually you don't need an implicit and rather want as much energy shield as possible. So we just go to grab the one with the highest energy shield, simple as that. Next, we're going to check out our options when it comes to crafting. To see this, first notice that this item requires intelligence, whereas some requires strength and dexterity, some requires only dexterity, and so forth. This matters because if we now go to modifiers and look at body armors, then we have a few different options. Our vile robe only required intelligence, so we would press the one with only intelligence on it. And now, my friends, you can see every modifier that can roll on this item, including all of the different essences, alloys, the desecrations, and the modifiers that we can roll with the new socketable runes. There's a lot to digest here, so let's go through all of it. Here we have the base prefixes and base suffixes. Unless you add a special crafting item to your item, then these are the only affixes that will ever roll on this item. Moreover, these affixes are locked to either prefix or suffix, meaning a maximum life roll will never roll as a suffix and an intelligence roll will never roll as a prefix, for example. You can't have two of the same modifier either. We also have the crafting tags, tiers, item level, and weightings. These are important. For the crafting tags, you're mainly going to use these when you're using desecrations because we can use omens to decide what desecrated tag we want. For example, Amanamu or Ulaman. We can also use the crafting tags with certain omens. For example, by using the omen of catalyzing exaltation. Using this, you can add quality to one of the crafting tags and use this omen to boost the chance of you adding it when you're using an exalted orb. For the tiers, we mentioned those earlier. If we look at max life, then we have a whopping 13 different tiers of max life that we can hit. We can also see the item level that is required to hit the specific tiers. I mentioned that you can't hit the highest resistances with a low item level item, and that's because to get tier 1, you need an item level of 82 on your item. You can still get the shittier tiers, But you must have an item level 82 to even have a chance of getting the best one. 82 is the highest item level you'll ever need, and is why those crafting bases are the most expensive. Lastly, you have the weightings. This is just a fancy way of saying the percentage of hitting a certain modifier. The total weighting of all suffixes here is 64,500. For example, if we just randomly add a suffix modifier to our item, then we will have a 12.4% chance of getting intelligence, which is the same as saying that intelligence has a weighting of 8,000 for the suffixes. We can, however, get any tier of intelligence, and if we're looking to grab tier 1 intelligence in particular, then the chance is only 1.5%, as it has a weight of 1,000. However, we can increase these odds by using higher level currency. For example, if we were to use a perfect orb of transmutation rather than a regular orb of transmutation, then the chance of hitting tier 1 intelligence goes from 1% to 8% because all the other tiers are below level 70 and we block them out. Alright. Now you may be wondering how these new runes work. There are different ones for different items, and if you socket them into your item, then you simply add extra modifiers that you can roll. Some of them being incredibly powerful, but obviously harder to hit, because you add more modifiers that can roll. Okay, let's use some of these basic currencies that we found now and craft an item. We wanted to make an energy shield body armor, and we found that the vile robe was the one with the highest energy shield. We want a normal rarity and item level 82 because we want to be able to roll the highest modifiers. We also select that we don't want it corrupted because some people corrupt normal items for some reason. I'm also going to add one more thing here, and that is item quality. This league, it's possible to drop a lot of exceptional bases. These items can roll with an extra socket or extra item quality that is above 20. If we want one with an extra socket, then we'd have to pay around 30 divines. But in terms of the amount of energy shield you can get from this, that's about equivalent to having 26% quality, just 30 times cheaper. Because if you're unfamiliar with item quality, then it boosts the base stat of your item. For example, if our base stat is energy shield and we add quality, then we'll increase our energy shield. You can also boost the quality of these above 20 yourself using Val infusers with the chance of corrupting it. They won't do the same thing as actually corrupting it though. They just make the item unmodifiable. Now I'm actually going to buy a couple of these and show you one of my favorite strategies. I'm calling it playing the numbers game. If we check out PoE.db again, then I want to hit one of these three as they bring the most energy shield. I'll do this in one of 3 body armors. The investment for doing this is low, and you can do this with pretty much any item except amulets and weapons, especially if you don't buy an exceptional base. Alright, let's slam and see what we get. Perfect transmute and perfect augmentation, and then we're going to add a resistance modifier to make it rare. Then we're going to fill out the suffixes with an omen of dextral exaltation and hit it with a greater exalted orb. And then to add one more prefix, I exalt it again. And lastly, we want to add a desecration. Before doing this, I take a sneak peek on the items to see if we have anything really promising. Because if we do, then I can add an ancient rib to get a higher tier modifier. Usually that's not worth it though if you're just making loads of these. And lastly, we activate an omen of abyssal echoes to have additional rerolls and see what we find. I got one solid body armor here, worth 50 divines. I also got this one that could have been good, but got a pair of shitty suffixes and a low roll, so this one I'll sell for a divine. If it rolled good suffixes, then I may have used an omen of light on it. But like this? Nah. This one's also meh, and these ones are bricked. In total, that's 5 divines for the bases and about 3 divines for the remaining materials for a quick 40 divine profit. This strategy is perfect if you're just starting out and buy cheap bases, because eventually you'll hit it big despite investing only a small amount of currency. Now obviously we're going to vol this because we're not pussies, but I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, no luck this time. For this strategy though, make sure to do it on other items than just body armors, so everyone's not doing the same thing. For helmets and rings in particular, I wouldn't add a resistance essence though. I'd then go with a greater essence of opulence instead to get a high-tier rarity modifier, as that's more valuable. Now, I already know what modifiers are good and what sell because I've been doing this for hundreds of hours. But if you don't, then what the hell do you do? Well, finding out what people need is actually simple. All you need to do is go to PoE.ninja and see what other people are playing. Just scout through a few different classes and see what items they are using. If they are using the same items, then it's likely those stats that you should be looking for, as they are likely used in some kind of meta build setup. Doing this, you'll get a grasp on what items actually sell. And in case you're just crafting for yourself, then you'd follow some kind of build guide and look to craft similar items. Another thing you can do to profit craft, although it's a bit scummy, is to keep an eye out on the trading website. Let's say you're scouting for a melee amulet, and suddenly you see several amulets that look completely identical to each other. This usually means that the item is deterministically craftable and profitable to make, meaning if you figure out how to craft it, you can just start making it yourself and take over the market. Another important thing to consider when trying to make profit crafting is using content creators. There are a lot of content creators making crafting tutorials, crafting different types of items. Once this has been done, the craft is typically not profitable anymore due to the supply increasing substantially. So are all the Fubguna, XXX the farmer, insert random content creator here useless when it comes to crafting tutorials? Not at all. I like the farmer guy personally, and I've been using his crafting guides to make profit. The thing is, I've never actually made the items he's crafting, but I've utilized his strategies to craft similar items. For example, if he's making projectile amulets with a strategy that looks profitable, then perhaps I'll use a similar craft to make spellcaster amulets. Or if he's got a great craft on bows, perhaps I'll use it to make quarterstaffs. This is a great way to both learn how to craft and make a good profit if you don't know what to actually craft. Alright, next up, let me show you one of the most common crafting strategies in the game, using one of my profitable crafts this league. We're going to create this amazing amulet. I'll post a detailed guide on how to make this in the description, but for now let's focus on the crafting strategy. And before crafting, I highly suggest you to actually think how you'd craft this yourself. Also, think about why this one in particular is 100% repeatable, where you can make identical amulets. Alright, now that we've thought out a strategy, let's make it. The standard strategy here is to fracture one good modifier, and then chaos spam another wanted modifier. In this craft, I bought absent amulets. Not only are they amazing because they come with an extra skill that costs a lot of spirit, but they are much easier to craft before they have one less prefix and one less suffix. So, first thing we need is a wanted modifier. Nearly all high-end modifiers need skill ranks and spirit. Buying skill rank amulets cost 10 times more than spirit, so I went with a spirit base. Then we need to fracture it. Once you've fractured the spirit, all you have to do to find the next good modifier, that is either melee ranks or projectile ranks for this one, is to chaos spam. Because once a modifier is fractured, you can't change it. This part will cost hundreds, hell, it can even cost 1,000 chaos orbs. If we go to PoE.db, then the chance of randomly hitting projectile ranks is actually only 0.1%, and the same goes for melee ranks. However, this is only for the suffixes, so the actual chance of hitting these is about half of that. Slightly higher than half because you already have a spirit modifier, and you have a higher chance of hitting a suffix than prefix on amulets. Alright, so after using around 300 chaos orbs, we have 2 perfect modifiers. Next, we will be forcing a prefix modifier onto the amulet using an omen of sinistral exaltation. We do this because we can then add an omen of sinistral crystallization to remove it via an essence. Because if we didn't add a prefix, then we'd instead remove the melee ranks, and that's a big no-no. The essence of choice here was an essence of the breach, because using this, we can actually boost the item quality all the way to 40. And while it may look like a useless essence to have on your amulet, you can just remove it after you've added quality onto your amulet. So that's exactly what we'll do. We'll remove it once the quality is at 34%. And why 34? Well, because then a +3 melee skill ranks actually goes to +4, and you can do the same for spell rank amulets and minion amulets, but not projectile amulets. Can you guess why? Well, let's go to PoE.db and check, shall we? Melee ranks has an attack tag, minions has a minion tag, and caster has a caster tag. All of these have their own qualities. Projectile skills has no tag, so we can't boost it via quality. So if you were to use this craft on a projectile amulet, then you'd instead add defenses. Alright, back to the craft. Once we've removed the quality essence, we just repeat to add a prefix again, so we may add a new essence, a perfect essence of enhancement in this example for the added defense. We now only have 1 modifier left to fill, and as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the easiest to hit because we can desecrate and use the desecration's specific omens. For this amulet, the skill gem quality is a Kurgle modifier, so we add a Kurgle omen before desecrating, also called Omen of the Black-Blooded. And now all you have to do is re-roll until you hit it. The chance of hitting it is high, but if you miss, you always have Omen of Light to remove it. Simple as that. This example is basically the backbone of all amulet crafts, because spirit and skill ranks is so insanely valuable and almost a must-have. Chaos spamming becomes your preferred method to hit both of them before you continue on crafting. Alright, for the next strategy, I have a jewel craft for you. Crafting jewels have been the most profitable out of all my crafts this league. Everyone needs them, usually several of them in fact, and they're easy to make. You just learn it once, and you can apply it to sapphires, emeralds, time-lost diamonds, and grab any modifiers you need. For this one, we'll make a time-lost emerald. The craft starts with finding or fracturing yourself, 1 good modifier. Then, we add another good modifier using chaos spamming. This is way faster and cheaper than doing it on an amulet though, because the weightings are much higher. Once you have 2 good modifiers, here comes the trick. You can add a liquid contempt, either an ancient one for time-lost jewels or just a regular potent one for other jewels. This step is gamba as it can remove either a prefix or a suffix, but we're looking to add an extra suffix for this one. Because now we can have 3 suffixes. For the final suffix, we want to add something useful. See this as the final part of our craft. What do we also do when we need to find a final, great modifier? Yes, that's right. We desecrate. Now we have 3 perfect modifiers as suffixes. But what about the prefixes? Well, we remove them and add 2 random shitter modifiers. Because once the amulet looks like this, with 3 suffixes and 2 prefixes, that is not the extra suffix modifier, mind you, we cannot remove the suffixes even if we tried. The game simply won't allow us. So what we do now is we chaos spam until we hit a good prefix. Then we use a crafted modifier as our last mod. Usually, having extra radius is the best, so we use that and pray that we don't remove our good prefix. But no worries if we accidentally remove it, because we can just chaos spam again and try once more. And finally, we've made ourselves one of the best jewels in the game. You can add quality to it if you'd like. And this is, of course, not only used for emeralds like this one. You can do this with a spellcaster sapphire, regular emeralds, sapphires, and all that good stuff. Just pick out 3 good suffixes, 1 good prefix, and start. You can also do it the other way around. Pick 3 good prefixes and add a crafted modifier as a suffix. Just remember that you can't use the very large radius liquid then, because that one is always a prefix. You can also add an extra suffix to weapons now. But just as a precaution, this trick does not work on the weapons. Can you guess why? Yes, that's right. The extra suffix rune cannot be removed like we could with the jewels. But we can still make good weapons using this. It's just a bit less deterministic than the jewels. But we can offset some of the RNG on weapons by using the Astrid's Creativity rune, allowing for 2 crafted modifiers. And why did I only mention this when talking about weapons and not body armor? Well, because the weapons actually have good essences, whereas most of the armor ones are just awful. So keep in mind when crafting weapons that this rune actually exists. You can then simply fracture 1 modifier, Chaos Orb 1 more, use the Astrid's Creativity to add 2 extra modifiers that you want. Then you have a Desecration added the 5th, meaning 5 out of 6 modifiers. You can decide by yourself what you want. There's only one that is RNG, and that's how you can craft weapons this league. Alright, so we've covered how you can craft armors, weapons, jewels. Next, let's hop onto the Standard League so we can waste some of the more expensive crafting currencies, just so you know they exist and when you would use them. We've covered briefly that you can use omens to remove a prefix and suffix of choice, but we can also combine some omens. This is useful if you've got an amazing item, but you have just one particular modifier that you need to change to turn a mediocre item into a godly item. For example, if I were to use an omen of whittling, then my Chaos Orb would remove one of these prefixes, because they are the lowest level. But perhaps I want to remove my fire resistance and add something else. Then you can pair the whittling with a dextral erasure that Chaos Orbs only suffixes, and you can target the suffix instead with your whittling omen. Another useful omen to know about is the catalyzing exaltation. We can use this to reduce the amount of RNG, because crafting rings and amulets with 6 modifiers will always involve some RNG. So let's say we really want lightning resistance on this ring. We know that lightning resistance rolls as a suffix. So we activate a dextral exaltation, so the next modifier will be a suffix. Then we can quality this bad boy up. Because if we then activate the catalyzing exaltation, then this omen will eat up your quality to increase the chance of hitting a lightning modifier. Having only 20 quality increases the chance somewhat, but as you saw in the amulet craft, there are now some essences that can boost your quality upwards of 40%, even 50 on some certain items. We also have our divine orbs, of course. These are also reserved for your stronger items, allowing you to change the numeric values on it. But you can also do a bit more with a divine orb than just that. For example, if you're done with your craft and never want to modify it, then you can use a sanctification omen. This will either boost or reduce its value by upwards of 20%. Using this, you can craft some insane weapons or amulets with additional skill ranks, but you also have Omen of the Blessed. If you have a really good item, but the implicit has a low roll, then you'd use this to divine only the implicit. This also works on the charm slots, by the way. So if you have a great belt, but it only has 1 charm slot on it, then you can just use this and add extra ones. Not everyone is aware of this, and sometimes you see belts going for a good 100 divines below its actual value, simply because it has fewer charm slots. This obviously doesn't work if it's corrupted, though. And speaking of corruption, what does corruption actually do? Well, we don't really need to know, do we? We can just go to our lovely PoE.db site and check for each item. Just scroll down and you can see the different options. You can also double corrupt items, if you don't mind destroying it. For the really high-end crafting, you also have Hinakora's locks that you can use on an item and see what the different currencies will do to it if you apply it. For example, what the next corruption will do. This one costs half a fortune though, and should be reserved for mirror tier items. Alright folks, I think that's actually all you need to know to start making some proper crafts on your own. But just to show you where to start crafting without wasting your currencies, let's head on over to Path of Exile. You can of course use this website for all of your crafting endeavors. It's mainly about your own preferences. You would then select your item here, and you'd get a similar table, the one we used on PoE.db. But for practicing crafting, you go to the emulator here. You can create an item from scratch or import your own items so you can think about how you'd craft on it next. Then you select a basis and its item level. And once you're here, you can just go ham and throw on any currencies you'd like. Definitely better than wasting your own currency until you learn how to craft. Okay, that's all for this one. Drop a sub and I'll see you in the next one.